Look at the record. Look at the record of Massachusetts while he was the governor there, and look at the record of Texas while I've been the governor there.
Any one of the people running for president on the Republican side would be an improvement over what we have, in my view.
Well, that's Texas Governor Rick Perry going right after Mitt Romney in the GOP presidential race, but frontrunner Romney keeping his focus on Barack Obama. Let's bring in our panel. Jonathan Wiseman of the the Wall Street Journal, Karen Tumulty from the Washington Post, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. So, Jonathan, let me start with you. Big developments this weekend. Perry's in, Pawlenty's out, Bachmann wins in Ames. And there seems to be the sense of a new top tier, Bachmann, Perry, Romney. What do you make of that?
We definitely got a lot more clarity in this race. You know, with Pawlenty walking out, that was the biggest thing that happened in Ames was having Tim Pawlenty leave the race. That's really what Ames seems to be for right now. It's a winnowing effect. And with Perry going in on the same day, you really got the sense that we've got a three-person race at this point between Perry and Bachmann fighting it out on the right, waiting to be the anti-Romney.
You know, Karen, there's some talk now that there's going to be kind of a two-stage race. First of all, Bachmann and Perry facing off to see who's going to be the champion of the Tea Party and the social conservatives, and then the winner of that is the anti-Romney going up against the frontrunners. It's silly to even talk about that at this point.
Not at all. And I think what's interesting is that the Republican primary process now looks a lot like what we're accustomed to seeing out of the Democrats. They usually have sort of an establishment candidate and a challenger. And it's also likely to last a lot longer with three frontrunners who are this strong than we have seen in the past.
I'm going to ask you not one, but two questions, Charles. First of all, what do you make of the weekend's developments? And I want to ask you what I asked Carl Cameron earlier. I have gotten a ton of email today from people saying, look, Ron Paul finished 152 votes behind Michelle Bachmann of the Ames straw poll, basically a dead heat. Why aren't we giving him his due?
Well, let me start with the second question because it's easier to remember. It was the latest one. Ron Paul is not going to be president of the United States. Libertarian is not going to be elected. We are not a libertarian country. It's a very important strain of conservative thought, but it's not the dominant one. If you look at the polls, this was a straw poll, which is self-selected. It measures enthusiasm, but it doesn't measure the breadth of support. It measures the depth. If you do a poll, his numbers are usually in single digits. So that's why people aren't speaking about him. The next president of the United States is going to have the name Bachmann or Perry or Romney or Obama. And that's probably it unless somebody enters the field.
Before you answer the first question I asked you,
I can't remember
Well,
anymore,
I'm going to say it. I just want to say all of you who are sending me emails over the last 24 hours. Now, that was a profile of courage. Yes, you've never complained about many questions. Well, so here it is. What do you make of the weekend?
Is this another one of your gotcha Mickey Mouse questions?
I knew you were going to do that.
I couldn't resist. Newt set me up for that one. The weekend,
me too.
I think it is. It's always winnowing. And I think it gave us the three candidates who I think for weeks it was clear we were going to get. We were always going to have a Romney. We were always going to have a Perry who was making noises on the outside, and it was going to be whoever came out of Iowa, out of the straw poll, with a clear victory. Looked like Bachmann in the end. It was, and that's what it is, a three-person race. And I think it is a two-tier elimination. There's a undercard to see who's going to be the non-establishment, the non-Romney, the non-centrist candidate, and then we're going to have the final round.
All right, in the time we have left in this segment, let me start with you, Jonathan. Let's talk about Rick Perry. Governor of Texas for 10 years, good story to tell about job creation, somewhere between 35% and 40% of all the jobs created since the recession in Texas. But some questions about his record and just sort of the unknown. Can he play at this level? What is your early read on Rick Perry?
I think a lot of reporters were really impressed with watching him work the room in Waterloo and watching him today in Des Moines at the Iowa straw poll. He just has a very deft touch with the public. But that public that he's talking to is the conservative wing of the Republican Party. I mean, he came at Obama with some language that we haven't heard, saying that he's in this so that you know, so that men in uniform or men and women in uniform can respect their commander-in-chief again, or that we need a president who is in love with this country. That's the kind of rhetoric that, you know, really gets conservative audiences going, but it still is untested out beyond that, beyond, you know, the Republican electorate.
Karen, he is a bare-knuckles politician.
He is, and he has spent his entire career being underestimated. You talk to people in Texas and they say Rick Perry is a very fierce campaigner and he's a very good campaigner. But he has never been tested on a national level. He's also never been vetted by the national press. And while there is, you know, a good story to tell in his Texas record, there's also, have always been, he's not a terribly popular figure in Texas, and he's not even a terribly popular figure among Texas Republicans. There are deep divisions in that party over the question of Rick Perry.
Your assessment of his strengths and weaknesses, Charles?
His strength in the nomination fight is that in the first round against Bachmann, I think he has an advantage. Pawlenty left a knife in her back as he left the stage when he said, you have all the passion, you have all those principles, but you've never achieved anything. Not only have you not been an executive, but even your principles, your advocacy has not succeeded in the Congress. And that's what Perry will use in attacking her. He may not do it as directly as Pawlenty did, but he'll say, I'm an executive, I ran Texas, it did well, what have you shown? So I think in that sense, he has the passion and the principles that Bachmann has, which Pawlenty did not in his encounter with Bachmann. And he also has the executive experience. So I think that's really going to help him in the preliminary bout. Look, the liability he has is what would show up in the general election. It's Texas. It isn't his fault. But I'm not sure that the country is ready for a Texan after its disappointments with the Bush administration only 3 years ago. And Bush, remember, was half New England. Perry is 100% Texas.
Next up, the president's economic bus tour is a good political strategy. Back.